It seems like yesterday when we were all fretting about Liberation Day. That's right, the biggest single implementation of tariffs on foreign goods since the Great Depression. Fun! Since then, tariffs have gone up, down, sideways, and somehow still haven't been ruled on by the Supreme Court. Well, after a couple months of that, you'd think everything would have leveled out, but somehow the tariffs returned. From Battleborn Progress, this is Battleborn Bites. My name is Jacob. Let's revitalize domestic manufacturing? Well, when I started writing this week's episode, it was supposed to be a short one, but it's been a couple of months since the original great tariffing of everything started, so it's worth taking stock of what kind of effects it's actually had. Let's start with a baseline. What tariffs are we actually talking about? Well, it's worth remembering that a lot of the Liberation Day tariffs weren't really based on anything, and ultimately fluctuated wildly. To say nothing of the fact that Trump paused them all for 90 days after announcing them, many of them have been replaced by new trade agreements that have wide-ranging knock-on effects. Two ironically funny ones actually dealt with the European Union and Japan. So here's a fun fact. Under the trade deals negotiated between the US and the EU and Japan post-Liberation Day, there's a 15% tariff on imported cars. Sounds like a lot, especially considering the old tariff was like 2.5%. Here's the deal. American car manufacturers actually have a 25% tariff on parts made outside the United States, plus a 50% tariff on the steel they're using to build the chassis for their cars. Those numbers larger than 15%. But we love domestic manufacturing, folks. We can't get enough of domestic manufacturing. Anyways, another interesting example, though, is a country without a new agreement, and that's China. China was by far the biggest tariff target, originally at 145%. China raised its tariffs on American goods to 125%, a little tit for tat. Everything got lowered to about 30 to 10%, respectively. But as a consequence of all this, China has basically stopped buying US soybeans because of those increased tariffs. Reuters reported earlier this month that for the first time in 20 years, Chinese buyers have bought literally nothing from the August soybean harvest in the US. And it's prompted a scramble in the Trump administration to come up with a bailout package for Midwest farmers sitting on piles of unsold soybeans. The insult is added to injury by the Argentina of it all. See, Argentina is headed by libertarian provocateur and sideburn enthusiast Javier Milei, who vowed to rescue the country from hyperinflation by doubling down on free market principles. This has not gone amazing, to say nothing of the additional crypto scams and alleged government kickback schemes. The US, led in this arena by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, has vowed to rescue Argentina with a $20 billion credit swap line that Bessent swears is not a bailout. This is not too unusual for the US government, except for the fact that Argentina has quickly become China's go-to supplier of, you guessed it, soybeans. There's also the tariff-adjacent stuff, especially the end of what's called the de minimis exemption back in August. This one you've probably felt yourself, especially if you've got literally any hobbies at all. In short, as part of the Tariff Act of 1930, we're going all the way back, this rule created a carve-out for people to import low-cost, small items with minimal custom costs, processing, and inspections. For a while, that threshold was $200, i.e. anything $200 or less isn't subject to taxes and tariffs. But under Obama, that line gets raised to $800 in 2016. To be fair, this was controversial among economists at the time, but less so among American shoppers, who, it must be said, love to buy stuff.
Clothes.
Treat yourself.
Fragrances.
Treat yourself.
Massages.
Treat yourself.
Mimosas.
Treat yourself.
Fine leather goods.
Treat yourself.
It's also no small part of why retailers like Temu, Shein, and even a platform like Etsy explode during this period. However, an increase in the volume of goods coming in through de minimis also means that none of those goods are actually getting screened for things like safety or effectiveness. Something you can say is not ideal. But in an example of how the Trump trade policy has worked, they didn't just change de minimis, they just got rid of it. All this had what we can call a mixed economic impact. The initial concern was a full-blown recession. And though that's not quite what's happened, GDP is still going up, and that's how you measure a recession, it's not as if the economy feels amazing either, as you may have noticed. So what's going on? Well, as a baseline, prices are up. To be expected with tariffs, where the whole point is that the good gets taxed once it's imported. Wow. someone's got to pay that tax, and a report from KPMG found 44% of surveyed businesses increase prices to cover tariffs. The problem is whether those increases continue. See, the theory on tariffs is that it's technically not inflation if the price increase only happens once. But if it keeps happening because people just expect price increases to keep happening, well, now we actually have inflation. So rest assured that in that KPMG study, they found 42% of businesses think more price increases are coming. At the same time, tariffs have also started to shrink the U.S. manufacturing industry, in large part because tariffs on key goods in different supply chains, steel, timber, rare minerals, what have you, are raising costs dramatically, even if you're already making something in the U.S. Labor Department data shows U.S. manufacturing has lost about 33,000 jobs in 2025, adding to another 87,000 jobs lost in 2024. So why is GDP still going up? Well, that has mostly to do with consumer spending. So about 70% of US GDP is down to consumer spending, and it turns out the top 10% of American earners making $250,000 or more per year are accounting for nearly half of all consumer spending, the biggest share since they started tracking that data. That's part of the reason why we're getting contradictory economic data points. Stuff like consumer sentiment dropping to brand new lows while spending keeps increasing. Some of this is also psychology too, especially when it comes to tariffs. Through 2025, the tariffs have been sold as something that's happening soon, but not immediately. So people and businesses rush to buy and sell existing inventory to avoid tariffed prices on the new stuff. But tariffed prices, they're coming. Like, who's gonna buy a 5-year-old Xbox Series X for $650? Real question, I would like to know who is buying a $650 5-year-old Xbox. But here's a question, is any of this tariff stuff even legal? Who knows? For real, who knows? Normally, the president can't just wave a magic wand and declare tariffs. That is a job for the US Congress. Though, because we live in a land where Congress has bent over backwards for the Trump administration, House Speaker Mike Johnson has actually prevented any votes on this year's tariffs until next April at the earliest. The Liberation Day tariffs were implemented under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, but there's a wrinkle here, because the idea with IEEPA is that the president has broad powers to declare an emergency to, quote, deal with any unusual and extraordinary threat which, as its source in whole or substantial part, is outside the United States to the nation, security, foreign policy, or economy of the United States, roughly. Please do not quote me exactly. The initial emergency in question, as you may have remembered, was declaring that China, Mexico, and Canada haven't done enough to stop fentanyl trafficking, which, sure, why not? Airtight defense. How that applies to literally every country in the world, including a couple that only have penguins on them, is anyone's guess. As a result, federal judges in 3 separate courts have ruled that Trump doesn't actually have the power to unilaterally impose tariffs under IEEPA, though they've let the tariffs continue, and now the thing's headed to the Supreme Court. Who knows how they'll rule? You can't trust the Supreme Court as far as you can throw it these days. But the Trump administration is warning of quote-unquote economic ruin if they strike them down, even though they're pretty plainly unconstitutional, but whatever. Anyways, none of those claims also match the data, which is something to remember. Like, the tariffs are not, they're just not raising that much money. It's not there. Anyways, what might be more ruinous, it turns out, are a set of brand new tariffs announced by Trump, targeting basically half the parts of a house, including kitchen cabinets, bathroom vanities, furniture, and Canadian lumber, all expected to, raise the cost of home building at a time when the housing supply is, let me check, it's crunched. Anyways, don't worry, everyone. Trump's also going to tariff movies to, I don't even know anymore. I mean, when you like tariff, can you tariff intellectual property? Like, are you tariffing like the hard drive? Like, what are you actually tariffing? Like, a tariff is on like a good that you have to import. So like, what are we talking about? Like, tariff is losing all meaning? What even is a tariff anymore? No one knows. Anyways, that does it for today's episode. If you like the show, be sure to like or subscribe so you're the first to know when we upload a new episode. Until then, for Battleborn Progress, this has been Battleborn Bites. My name is Jacob. We'll see you next week.